introduce Reece.
Hi everyone, my name is Reece S, and I'm really excited to introduce my mentee Reece Sharp today. Reece is a sophomore at Castellea, which is actually also where I went to middle school and high school. From our very first meeting, I've been really impressed by Reece's enthusiasm and passion for her project. She had an idea for what she wanted to build before we even started, and she worked really hard this whole summer to bring that idea to life. Reece took initiative on building her project and did an amazing job with leveraging her HTML knowledge while also learning new skills in Python and web development. I'm really proud of everything that Reece has accomplished this summer, and I'm really excited for all of you to get to hear more about her experience.
Yeah. Thank you guys so much. So to introduce my mentor is Ria. She's a senior at MIT, and this past summer she was working with Tesla's mobile robotics team. And like she mentioned, we went to the same high school, and so that's a pre-existing connection we already had before we started this program. So moving on to my project, the project that I created had multiple facets, one of which was Python and HTML. Ria and I got together and we decided that the best way to go about with my project would be to use Python as the backend code because Python had the ability to send requests to other databases and other websites, which was really helpful in my code, which is a vocabulary website. And we also use HTML, which I had some previous knowledge in, for stylizing. And then we use Flask and PyCharm to write the code. We use PyCharm, which is an IDE, and then we use Flask, which is a Python library, as our micro web framework. And those were both new skills to me. And then some of the new skills I learned this summer were Python. I'd never used it before, but we learned as we went along using Flask tutorial, which was a site online, and we learned as we went along with Python. And then HTML, I knew some knowledge, but I wasn't familiar with some intricacies of the code. And I never really understood what terminal was, which is something on your computer, and that was really helpful. That was a new skill I learned to how to run code, as well as we use CSS, and I learned how to use GitHub, which was an interesting experience that I'm still figuring out today. Okay, so my project, My project, it was a vocabulary app. So I came into the program with an idea for what I wanted to do. I wanted to create a vocabulary app where readers could store new vocabulary they get while reading books, because I realized as a reader there's a big disconnect between the amount of new words you read and the amount of new words you retain, and so I wanted to create something to help shrink that gap, and so I wanted to create this vocabulary app, and throughout the summer I accomplished some of the aspects of this app. We created a login page with a username database, a semi-functional library page where a reader can store the books that they've read, and then a functioning add new book page, and then a books database to go along with that. So this is the code for some of those sections. So this is the Python code for the register and login pages. It kind of just stores your information in the database and checks to make sure for the register that there's only one username and you can't have two users with the same username and all of that. And then this is the HTML, which kind of just presents the form where you fill in your information for username, for logging in, and for registering your account. This is the new book Python and HTML code. The HTML is very similar to the login and register code, and so is the new book. It just goes to a different database. And then this is the library Python and HTML. They're very similar. The difference is with the HTML, we need to find a way to display the book titles that you saved, which is something there's still an issue with now, but we got very far. And then moving along, these are how we set up the databases using SQL, which is we use that But these are some future additions I would like to work on in my project. We have bugs that any coding project comes with bugs, and there are some bugs that we still need to work out, that I still need to figure out, and that's something I want to fix. I also want to add a database to store more word definitions, because at this point I only have a username and a books database, but also adding a database to store the words and their definitions, and then adding a study feature similar to that of Quizlet, if that makes any sense. If you're familiar with that website, adding a study feature where you can study books, and then a generate new words per book, which is looking in the far, far future. But so this is the ideal setup. It's a little similar to how my setup is now, which is, I'll show you in the demo, but the ideal setup is you log in and then you're entering this library page where you have your books displayed, and then you can click on your books and you're given the word titles, and then you can click on the words and you're given the definitions, etc., etc. And then you also have the study feature, which is explained on the right-hand image. So that's the ideal setup, but this is my demo. So here you go onto the site and then you register a username, which I did Alistair, and then a password, which I used code. And then I'm logging in right here. I did the same username, Alistair, but I typed the wrong password. Well, I typed the correct password. My bad, I apologize. And then you go to the library page, and here you do the username again, and then you add a book. This time they added the book 1984, which is a great book in my opinion. And then you add another username to add a new book. You have to make sure you're using the correct username to associate with your account. And then you just add your username and a new book title. And as you can see, once it's adding right here, every time you add a new book, it adds it to the library. It adds it to the library. So you can see that they're adding new lines to the library. The titles don't show up right now, and that's a bug that I need to fix in the future and figure out how it works. But that's something we're still working on. But every time you add a new book, a new line gets added. And then you log out, which was something that happened at the end. You click the top and it goes back to the login page and it logs out your account. So that was my demo, and this is my code. And overall, this experience with Magic has been magical. It's been really fun. I really loved getting to connect with my mentor and seeing the connections we had, because we both went to the same school, grew up in the same area. But I also really loved and enjoyed learning new coding languages and understanding how each coding language is different and how each coding language works, and how they all can be used simultaneously to create a multifaceted web page. I also learned this summer that Google everything. Google is your most helpful resource. And when all else fails, just look it up. There's bound to be someone who's written some sort of Tumblr post on it or whatever to help you figure it out. And also try different solutions. Don't be afraid to try something. If it fails, go back to your old one and try something new. And that's something I had to do when we were debugging, and that was also a challenge I faced, figuring out how to solve these bugs and how to progress in the code without messing everything up. And then another challenge that I faced this summer was working with new languages that I didn't fully understand. Because of the time constraints of this summer, I didn't have time to completely learn Python, but instead of work as we went along. And so that was a challenge I faced this summer. But yeah, thank you. Yeah. Does anyone have any questions? Thank you so much.
We have time for a question or two. If any of the other mentees or mentors, anybody in the audience have a question for Reece?
Hi, Reece. My name is Sarah. I have a question, but first a compliment is that I love this app and this idea. So I think now I have two questions. What made you think of this as a project? And also, how would you like to, do you have any ideas for expanding it? And as an avid reader, I kind of love the idea of maybe expanding it to include quotes from a book or something. Is there a way to put, would there a way to put multiple words in there rather than just one vocabulary word?
Yeah, that's a great question. So to answer your first question, I came up with the idea because during quarantine, I started reading more, and I realized that there's a huge disconnect between the amount of words you read and the amount of words you retain. And my mother and my family, we all love like learning new vocab words. It's like a thing in our family. And I always used to ask or like look it up and like, what does this word mean? But I never used to remember it. And I realized that creating something where you can store these words and you can always go back to them and be like, oh my gosh, that's a word I learned from this book. Now I remember it. Can be really helpful because you can just like, once you like are reminded of something, it kind of all comes back to you. And so I thought this app would be a good place to like, to store that process, if that makes any sense. And that's how I came up with it. And to add on to your question, yeah, there probably would be a way to, in the future, to add quotes. That's a great idea. One idea that I did have for the future would be to not only store the word in the definition, but to have a third option where you store the word in context, if that makes any sense. So if your book read, and Sarah took a nap, say you didn't know what the word nap meant, for example, which I think we do, but if you didn't know what the word nap meant and you added it to your vocabulary, you could also add the sentence, and Sarah took a nap. So you could like see the word in context in relation to the book that you had previously read. And then a natural progression from that would of course be what you were saying with adding quotes, so you can like store your favorite quotes from the book as well. Thank you. Thank you for your question.
Thank you, Reece. I think there was a question in chat. Any ideas how this might help those with learning differences? I don't know if you kind of covered that already, Reece, but would you like to?
Yeah, so I'm not an expert on learning differences. I don't really know much about them, but I think, at least in my experience, it's helpful to have a place where you can go back to these words and where you can see them in the context of something you're familiar with. For example, your favorite book, and that may help. I don't really know the extent of different learning differences or how their nuances of them, so I'm not sure I'm able to answer this question to its fullest to the greatest of my greatest ability. But answering it to my greatest ability, would be that looking back at words in an environment you're comfortable with could be helpful, if that makes any sense. Yeah.
Thank you, Reece. That was a great answer, and saying that you don't know and you learn more about it.